One fake, one lie, one perfectly crafted forgery. And entire institutions, governments, and millions of believers fell into line. Some of these hoaxes lasted years, some lasted decades. One of them is still embedded in modern textbooks even though it was exposed half a century ago. Counting down the 10 greatest hoaxes that fooled the world. Number 10. The Cottingley Fairies. In 1917, two young cousins in Yorkshire, England, Elsie Wright, age 16, and Frances Griffiths, age 9, produced 5 photographs that appeared to show them playing with delicate winged fairies in a wooded glen near their home. The photographs caught the attention of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes and a committed believer in spiritualism. Doyle published the images in 1920 in the Strand magazine, declaring them authentic. The hoax fooled the public for over 60 years. In 1983, Elsie and Frances, by then elderly women, finally confessed that the fairies had been cut from a popular children's book and propped up with hatpins. To her death, however, Frances continued to insist that one of the 5 photographs showed a real fairy. Number 9. The Hitler Diaries. In April 1983, the German news magazine Stern announced it had acquired 60 handwritten diaries kept by Adolf Hitler from 1932 to 1945. The magazine had paid roughly 9.3 million Deutschmarks, about $3.7 million at the time, to acquire them. The British historian Hugh Trevor Roper, a leading expert on Hitler, authenticated the diaries. Stern began serializing extracts on the 25th of April, 1983. Within 2 weeks, the West German Federal Archives ran chemical tests on the paper. The diaries contained whitening agents not manufactured until after the Second World War. The entire collection had been forged by a Stuttgart-based dealer named Konrad Kujau, who had been producing fake Nazi memorabilia for years. Kujau was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. Stern's editor and the journalist who brokered the deal both lost their jobs. The magazine never fully recovered its reputation. Number 8. The Cardiff Giant. In October 1869, workers digging a well behind the farm of one William Newell in Cardiff, New York, claimed to have unearthed a 10-foot-tall petrified man. The discovery created an immediate sensation. Crowds gathered. Newell charged 25 cents admission, then raised it to 50 cents as demand grew. The giant was actually a slab of Iowa gypsum that had been carved into a crude human form, treated with acid to age it, and secretly buried by Newell's cousin George Hull, a tobacconist and committed atheist who wanted to embarrass biblical literalists. Even after Hull confessed in December 1869, the public was so captivated that the figure continued to draw paying visitors. P.T. Barnum tried to buy the giant. When Newell refused, Barnum had a copy carved and exhibited it as the real one. When the original giant's owners sued Barnum, the judge famously ruled that they could not sue Barnum for calling their fake a fake. Number 7. The Piltdown Man. In December 1912, the amateur archaeologist Charles Dawson presented to the Geological Society of London a collection of skull fragments and a jawbone he claimed to have recovered from a gravel pit in Piltdown, East Sussex. The find was hailed as the missing link between apes and humans. A creature with a human-sized brain case and an ape-like jaw. For over 40 years, the Piltdown Man held a central place in human evolutionary textbooks. Generations of British schoolchildren learned that the first true human had been found on English soil. Then, in 1953, fluorine dating techniques applied to the bones revealed the truth. The skull was that of a medieval human. The jawbone belonged to an orangutan with its teeth filed down and stained to match. The hoax had been planted in a gravel pit 40 years earlier. Charles Dawson is widely considered the most likely perpetrator, though debate continues. The Piltdown Man set back paleoanthropology by decades by misleading researchers about what early hominids should look like. Number 6. The Great Moon Hoax. In August 1835, the New York newspaper The Sunday published a series of 6 articles claiming that the astronomer Sir John Herschel had discovered life on the moon, using a powerful new telescope at the Cape of Good Hope. According to the articles, the moon was populated by bat-winged humanoids, unicorns, blue goats, and bipedal beavers that built fires and lived in elegant temples carved from sapphire. The series caused a national sensation. The Sunday circulation jumped from a few thousand to over 19,000 copies a day. the largest in the world at the time. The articles were illustrated with lithographs depicting the bat creatures, deer like quadrupeds, and crystalline cities. Sir John Herschel, who had not been involved at all, learned of the hoax weeks later when copies of the Sunday reached him in South Africa. He was reportedly amused at first, then increasingly irritated. The author was likely Sunday reporter Richard Adams Locke, though he never fully admitted authorship. The hoax was finally publicly debunked weeks after publication, but the Sunday never retracted the original articles. Number 5. The donation of Constantine. Sometime in the mid-8th century, an unknown forger, likely working within the papal court, produced a document claiming that the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great had, in the year 315, transferred imperial authority over the Western Roman Empire to Pope Sylvester I and his successors. The document granted the Pope dominion over Rome, all of Italy, and the Western Roman provinces. For over 700 years, popes cited the donation as the legal basis for their temporal authority over much of Europe. It shaped the medieval balance of power between kings and the papacy. In 1440, the Italian humanist scholar Lorenzo Valla applied detailed linguistic analysis to the document. He showed that the Latin vocabulary used in the donation contained words and expressions that did not exist in the 4th century. Valla proved the document was an early medieval forgery. The church initially banned his work but eventually accepted the conclusion. 7 centuries of political legitimacy based on a forged piece of parchment. Number 4. The War of the Worlds radio broadcast. On the night of the 30th of October 1938, Orson Welles and the Mercury Theatre on the Air performed a radio adaptation of H.G. Wells's novel The War of the Worlds, presented as a series of breaking news bulletins. The program described a Martian invasion of New Jersey in stark, urgent language, complete with simulated reporters being cut off mid-sentence and an apparent national emergency address. Listeners who tuned in after the opening disclaimer believed the events were real. Newspapers the following day reported widespread panic. Families fleeing their homes, jammed switchboards, traffic jams in New Jersey. The actual scale of the panic was almost certainly exaggerated by newspapers eager to attack the upstart medium of radio. But the broadcast cemented the principle that mass media could create real, immediate effects on a national audience. A lesson that has shaped propaganda, advertising, and journalism ever since. Welles himself spent the rest of his career both celebrating and downplaying the panic depending on the audience. Number 3. The Bernie Madoff Ponzi scheme. For at least 17 years, and possibly considerably longer, the New York financier Bernie Madoff ran what turned out to be the largest investment fraud in history. His firm reported steady, almost impossibly smooth returns of roughly 10 to 12% annually, year after year, through bull markets and bear markets alike. In reality, no investments were being made at all. Madoff was paying earlier investors with the deposits of newer investors. The classic structure of a Ponzi scheme. The fraud unraveled in December 2008 when the financial crisis caused too many clients to request redemptions simultaneously. Madoff confessed to his sons. They turned him into the FBI the next day. The total paper value of the fraud was approximately $65 billion. The actual cash lost by investors was around $17.5 billion. Madoff was sentenced to 150 years in federal prison. He died there in 2021. His scheme remains the largest individual investor fraud ever uncovered. Number 2. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Published in Russia around 1903, the protocols claimed to be the secret minutes of a meeting of Jewish leaders plotting world domination. The document was a fabrication, almost certainly produced by agents of the Russian Imperial Secret Police, the Okhrana. Significant portions were directly plagiarized from a French satirical book by Maurice Joly, written in 1864, that had nothing to do with Jewish people. Despite being conclusively exposed as a forgery in 1921 by a Times of London correspondent named Philip Graves, who side by side compared the texts, the protocols spread internationally. Henry Ford published an English version in his Dearborn Independent newspaper in the 1922. The Nazi regime made the protocols a centerpiece of its anti-Semitic propaganda. To this day, despite over a century of debunking by historians and courts, the protocols continue to circulate in extremist literature in many parts of the world. It is one of the most destructive forgeries ever produced. No piece of fictional paper has been used to justify more real human suffering, and the #1 greatest hoax in history. Han van Meegeren's Vermeer forgeries. In the 1930 seconds, the Dutch painter Han van Meegeren was a competent but unremarkable artist whose work was repeatedly dismissed by critics. He decided to take revenge by creating paintings so perfectly in the style of Johannes Vermeer that he could pass them off as undiscovered masterpieces. Van Meegeren spent years perfecting his technique. He sourced 17th-century canvases, ground his own pigments using period-correct materials, baked his finished paintings in an oven to artificially age them, and rolled them over wooden cylinders to create authentic-looking craquelure. The network of fine cracks that develops in old oil paintings. In 1937, he sold his first Vermeer, titled The Supper at Emmaus, to the Boijmans Museum in Rotterdam for the equivalent of millions of dollars. Leading Vermeer experts pronounced it the artist's greatest masterpiece. Over the next decade, Van Meegeren sold at least 6 more forged Vermeers and several fake Pieter de Hooys. One of the buyers was Hermann Goering of Nazi Germany, who acquired a forged Vermeer titled Christ with the adulteress for over 1 million guilders. After the war, Allied investigators found Goering's Vermeer and traced it to Van Meegeren. He was arrested in 1945 and charged with collaboration with the Nazis, a capital offense for selling a Dutch national treasure to the enemy. To save his own life, Van Meegeren made an astonishing claim. He confessed that the painting was a forgery he had made himself. Authorities did not believe him, so Van Meegeren, locked in a guarded studio under government supervision, painted a brand new Vermeer in front of journalists, art experts, and police, proving his ability. He was convicted of forgery instead of treason. He had successfully fooled every major Vermeer scholar in the world, the Nazi High Command, and the international art market. Even his sentencing was theatrical. He died of a heart attack 5 weeks into a 1-year prison term, a folk hero in the Netherlands. The greatest hoax in history is the only one its perpetrator was honored for. 10 hoaxes, some destroyed nations, some launched careers, some are still believed by millions today. The common thread is not the cleverness of the forger. It is the willingness of the audience to believe what they were already inclined to believe. That is what every great hoax exploits.